Looking Back.
All right, so for our looking back, I want to first start out, saying what we're looking back on, and in our article, we've got 16 queer Black trailblazers who made history. But before we do that, I wanted to take a moment because Cynthia McDonald was supposed to be on this episode and present this article. This is something that is very much in her wheelhouse. Unfortunately, for the second time this year, her family has suffered a horrendous tragedy. Our hearts go out to her and her family. And while being a nonprofit, we are unable to do certain things like plug any kind of GoFundMe if there is one. I haven't seen one yet from her. We can't plug that, but what we can do is we can all show her and her family all the love that we can. So if you are in the live chat right now, give us some hearts for her. When the show is concluded, or if you're watching this later, just go down to that comment section and just show her the love, because Cynthia is the voice of the nonprofits. You know how she beautifully sings the faithless gospel, but she is also the closest thing that any of us come to having a soul on this show. So please, please, please give her your love, and tell her that we grieve with you and we wish you all the healing.
Cynthia is a fucking queen.
She is very much that. So again, our article is, the 16 queer Black trailblazers in history. And I mean, this is a pretty good list. And I wanted to highlight two, because again, Cynthia really wanted us to highlight two major ones and kind of gloss over Lightfoot because Chicago. Because Chicago, it's politics in Chicago. I don't know what to tell you. But James Baldwin, writer and social critic, he's done a lot of essays, Notes from a Native Son, Giovanni's even room, if I could actually read that. He's had, lectures, race, racism, and the gay community, big time activist, and he was around 1924 to 1987. So, definitely that civil rights era where it was not good to be either Black or gay. And then the other one she wanted us to highlight was Barbara Jordan, civil rights leader and attorney, first African-American elected to the state Senate, first woman African-American elected to Congress, 1972. She was given the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which if you go through this list, you're going to notice that there's quite a few Presidential Medal of Freedoms in here. And, she was open about her life partner for nearly 30 years. And again, a lot of that during a time when it was not good to be Black or gay. So a lot of really great names in here. But I want to hear what everyone else thinks as well. Except again, not about Lori Lightfoot. And Cynthia, one more time, just for you, fuck Green Bay.
Fuck Green Bay indeed. One thing that stuck out to me as a sort of a theme was that I was looking at the people on the list, And of the 11 people in the article who are no longer alive, none of them made it past their mid 60s. And that really, like, I was just looking at the lifespans there, and I'm like, it just stuck out in my head that marginalized communities typically, suffer from poor healthcare, higher rates of homelessness, incarceration for pretend crimes that aren't actually crimes, and how that's reflected in people's lifespans. I wonder how much more these people could have accomplished. Ben, I'm sure you can attest to, the lack of care in marginalized communities affecting people's well-being in the long run.
Oh, absolutely. And intersectionality is a big thing that I'm seeing here, and kind of one of the main things I got out of it. Because with anybody that you have in the LGBT community, they bridge several different communities. You have all kinds of different backgrounds, all different stories portrayed in this one community, and it's definitely something that plays into people's health, and this is something that is very generational. Things have gone on for a long time that play factors, and so when we're talking about the LGBT community, we can't look at it as just this one type of person in the LGBT community. We need to think about all of these different people that are brought together under this umbrella, and the many other umbrellas that they are also under. And so people kind of in this list that I was paying a lot of attention to. I mean, I have a huge respect for Marsha P. Johnson, and her journey being a trailblazer for the trans community. Like, I get emotional just every time I think about her story and everything that she went through and everything that she did so that people like Phoebe and I can be as open as we are today. And I mean, it's there's a lot to be said. I definitely wish Cynthia was here, because I really would love to hear her takes on all this.
I wish Cynthia was here too. I was actually looking forward to being on another show with Cynthia. I mean, I'll take Jason too. Jason's cool too, but I was really looking forward to having Cynthia's input into this, because she's probably heard of these people, almost all of them, and I will confess I'd heard of two of them before reading this. So it was an interesting experience. The one thing I will say, and this is on a less serious note, but where's RuPaul on this list? Like, is anyone not surprised not to see RuPaul on this list?
I'm surprised. I'm surprised as well.
Because
I think it was, I don't know if they wanted to go with some maybe lesser known, but also RuPaul is kind of RuPaul is RuPaul. that's really
RuPaul
all you can
is fabulous.
Yes, absolutely.
And RuPaul is show business too. Yeah, and I get that.
Well, and there is some show business in there. In this list as well. So I mean, it's not just political leaders, but there is show business and activists, and politicians, all the different likes. But I will say that as much as Cynthia isn't actually here, I mean, she did provide us some fantastic notes that we're definitely pilfering. And one of the things I wanted to read a quote by Lorraine Hansby, because this ties into the whole secular nature or the atheist nature that we do here on the nonprofits, and it's that God is just one idea I don't accept. It's just that it's just that I get so tired of him getting credit for all the things the human race achieves through its own stubborn effort. There simply is no God. There's only man, and it's he who makes miracles. and the sooner that we realize this fact that we are the ones doing this, that we are contributing to this world, that we have much more power than we even think is possible, then we can move forward from racism, from transphobia, from homophobia, and all these quote unquote misunderstood things.
That was a great quote. I think there was another one that I really liked. Was at a debate. Who was that? It was James Baldwin debating William F. Buckley Jr. at the University of Cambridge. And I know, folks, we don't often do quotes here, but I this was my favorite one. Jason got to do one, so I get to do one. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Now we are speaking about expense. I suppose there are several ways to address oneself, to some attempt to find what that word means here. Let me put it this way, that from a very literal point of view, the harbors and the ports and the railroads of the country, the economy, especially of the southern states, could not conceivably be what it has become if they had not had, and do not still have, indeed for so long, for so many generations, cheap labor. I am stating very seriously, and this is not an overstatement. I picked the cotton, I carried it to the market, and I built the railroads under someone else's whip for nothing. For nothing. Mic drop. Mic drop. Bam. Phoebe, did you have something to add to to this cavalcade of quotes?
I can't follow that. I just can't follow that. There's no way of following that kind of mic drop. It's just not possible.
Well, to be fair, it wasn't my mic drop, but this particular during this debate, Baldwin spoke for 24 minutes, wasn't interrupted, and when he finished, the crowd gave him a standing ovation. Which
I should think so.
I should think so. I mean,
well done.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, I was reading through this list. There were so many inspirational things that these folks have said, and again, I said this earlier, but I wonder how much these people could have truly accomplished had they been nurtured and have they had access to the same opportunity that white straight people have and continue to have. The world would be a much better place. But did anybody have any other favorites from this list?
Well, I'm always naturally going to be drawn towards Marsha P. Johnson. Always, as a trans woman, I'm always going to be naturally drawn to one of the most vivacious and wonderful characters on this list. I mean, those of you who are a regular viewer of ACA programming will know the wonderful Arden Hart, and she, for LGBT History Month last year, did a wonderful drawing of Marsha P. Johnson, and it encapsulates everything about Marsha, because Marsha is one of those characters which is trying to be stolen from the trans community by those who don't like the trans community. And by that I mean is that there's a lot of denial that Marsha was ever a member of the trans community. Oh, Marsha was just a drag queen. Oh, Marsha was just XYZ, but Marsha wasn't trans. And making sure that the trans community don't allow the theft of Marsha P. Johnson away from the trans community is really, really important, because we, as a community of trans people, particularly when it comes to non-white trans people, is essential to make sure that we keep the voices of non-white trans people there and non-white trans people heard, and to keep hearing, no, Marsha wasn't trans. You may not like that Marsha was trans, but guess what? Marsha was trans Marsha may have been a drag act as well, but that was a way of going out and making money that wasn't going out and doing other things that would get you collared and felt by the law. So when the men in blue would come down the street where you were, it was much safer to be inside somewhere than it would be to be outside somewhere. And that still wasn't great, because you remember the Stonewall riots happened at places where there were a majority of queer, non-white folk, and mainly drag queens, mainly trans people who were there at the Stonewall. And before that, the one that always gets missed before Stonewall was the Compton Cafeteria riot in San Francisco. And to remember that history as well, and to remember that trans people have been this minority, and to remember that Marsha was one of the Trailblazers. I will forever love the life of Marsha P. Johnson, because it allows me to sit here today as a trans person and go, I am a trans woman and I am not going anywhere.
Well said. Well said. Well, can you tell me a little bit more about the cafeteria riot? I'm curious.
Compton Cafeteria in San Francisco was a cafeteria that was well known as a frequenting place for trans people in that area. And the police used to harass the patrons there, used to make it known that the patrons weren't very welcome. And one day they had enough. Effectively, they had enough and started throwing furniture around, started throwing things at them. And it got to the point where, you know what? We've had enough. And a full-blown riot was in full flow at the Compton Cafeteria riot. And there is a plaque outside where the Compton Cafeteria riot, and I think it was 1962. Please, if you're in the live chat and you know the exact date of the Compton Cafeteria riot, please put it in the live chat right now and make Phoebe look like she's completely out of date on her facts here. But
148 people are Googling it right now.
The Compton Cafeteria riot predated the Stonewall riots. The Stonewall riots were more well known and so on. 1966, I'm being told in my ear right now. So 1966 is when the Compton Cafeteria riots were, and they were seen as the first nexus of the LGBT rights movement that predated the Stonewall riots. So in a way, the Compton Cafeteria riot said, yeah, you can riot. And then Stonewall went, yeah, they rioted, so let's riot too.
I think I will share another one of Cynthia's favorite quotes from another famous black man. You may have heard of him. His name is Martin Luther King Jr. when he said that riots are the voice of the unheard. But before we wrap up, final thoughts on black queer folks in history. Jason?
So I've actually always been under the assumption, a very incorrect assumption, that black and LGBT would have a certain kinship because they do share some of the violence throughout history. And when I was doing some other shows, I got to see firsthand that really is just not the case. And
true,
it was so refreshing coming to the Atheist Community of Austin and seeing black atheists do have a kinship because they actually do know their history a lot better than your average layperson, and they know that there is a kinship. And so it seems like when you are able to break free from those religious ideas, you're able to explore you're basically able to open up your mind. And I think that is something that, we see, some would disagree with that. I definitely have seen, from the people that I've worked with here, that no, there definitely is much higher levels of understanding in kinship and allyship. And I'm definitely, glad that even though I'm got the face of the enemy, that I can still be an allyship to you, to, the Black community, the Black LGBT community, the LGBT community at large. And, I'm glad that you can tolerate the face of the enemy here.
Oh, Jason, you're welcome anytime, buddy. You know that. Phoebe, final thoughts? Ben, final thoughts?
So
Anybody?
My final thought on this is that I am very fortunate in my personal life to be accepted by my very religious Nigerian stepfather, because I was able to point to some of these Black LGBT people on the list and say that it's not just a white thing, which is what he was saying when we were first introduced to each other. And whilst we have our differences, he is able to accept that trans people exist in his culture as well as in my culture. And without these trailblazers being visible, I wouldn't have been able to point to them and go to my stepfather and go, look, we're perfectly normal human beings.
Yeah, for sure. Ben, looks like you get the last word, my friend.
Well, I mean, I'm just going to throw it back to what I said earlier about intersectionality. So don't be so ready to throw somebody into one box when they might fit across multiple different spectra and have all kinds of different stories. And I really think it is important to make sure that these stories are not forgotten. And I'm really thankful to Cynthia, who, again, though she couldn't be here today, for helping us understand more about things that we're not taught very much about. And most of us, like Nate was saying, this doesn't really phase us on a daily basis for many of us. And I do think that it's good to remember all of this. And I hope that Cynthia is doing all right. I hope her family's doing all right. It's been a rough time for her, but we miss you, Cynthia.
We miss you, Queen Cynthia. And yes, folks, throw some comments down there. Let Queen Cynthia know that she has your support.